Hello and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Insight AppTab webinar. My name is Jeff. I'm the director here at Insight. It's my pleasure to welcome you here. Before we continue, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we're gathered today, both here in Mianj in Brisbane and anywhere where guests may be joining us from across the state or across Australia. We pay respects to elders past and present. We also like to recognise lived experience as the reason why we all do this work and the importance of them in working with us together and acknowledging and responding to these issues. It's my great pleasure to welcome someone who needs no introduction, really, let alone to this podium or to this audience. It's Cameron Francis, ex-alumni of Dovetail and of this program, who has left us, sadly but happily last year, to lead the drug checking service delivery in Queensland. So he's kindly agreed to join us or come back and report on the drug checking efforts in Queensland. And so without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Cameron to talk to us about the state of drug checking. Welcome, Cameron.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jeff. Thank you, everybody. Lovely to be back home in the Edwards Miller room of Brisbane's most beautiful building, Bayala. I've really missed it, but it's lovely to be back. Let's get into it. I've got quite a bit to talk about today. There's two parts to the presentation today. One part at the beginning, I just want to talk a little bit about the advocacy that went on behind the scenes to make drug checking happen in Queensland, because I think it's a really interesting story to know how that all went down. And we've also got a hot exclusive off the press, our data from our first music festival and also the first month of the Checkpoint fixed site that's based here in Brisbane. Before I go much further, I want to acknowledge traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting on today and pay respects to the elders past and present. So I'll just talk a little bit about who the Loop is initially and then how we sort of got here. The Loop Australia is a non-government organisation established back in 2018 to deliver drug checking services in Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. We are predominantly initially a fully voluntary based, although recently now finally got a few wages in there. But most of us work in alcohol and other drugs or research. And we got together back in 2018 in Queensland. We got together because we basically saw an opportunity to make drug checking happen. And the best way to do that was to develop an organisation made up of local people who work in the sector already and already understand our ecosystem here in Queensland to set up the organisation and deliver it and put, proposals to government. And that's sort of what we did. So how it all really started, I mean, for me, I started this journey probably fairly intensely in 2016. In October 2016, there was a series of mass overdoses on the Gold Coast that resulted in one fatality and about 20 people hospitalised. The media reporting of that was around a so-called zombie drug, which was a term made up by some health professional, which they gave to the media, who then picked it up. And all this hysterical reporting about zombie drugs killing people. There was no public health response to that mass overdose outbreak. Instead, we got a really intense policing response to it. And we heard sort of through the grapevine what substances might have been involved in that mass overdose, but were not able to publicly release that information. And it seemed like a huge missed opportunity to me because we had a really serious drug out there and no public health response. That substance went on to cause a mass overdose in Melbourne a few months after that, and 3 people died, another 20 or 30 people hospitalised. And same situation in Melbourne. The information around what drug caused that was available at that time to the police, who put out an internal alert for police only to be on the lookout for this terrible drug. And that was, again, really concerning because, I mean, what point is it police knowing what drug has killed someone? What about the people who might be using these drugs? And that was a moment that really activated a number of people in Australia to really start to do something about this topic. And that's definitely when I become really motivated. In 2017, Fiona Measham, who's a professor of criminology and founder of the Loop UK, was a keynote speaker at AppSAD conference down in Melbourne, I think it was, in 2017. And a bunch of us met Fiona on that trip while she was out here in Australia. Fiona spent time in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne and met lots of different people, and basically we all sort of started to talk to each other and go, hey, look, we're all having the same idea. There's this problem of, we need to get this information out there. We think that forming a non-government organisation to deliver the service is the pathway to do it. So let's set up an organisation. And then that's kind of what we did. Here in Queensland, Queensland was similar. I mean, we were sitting here in Queensland watching the advocacy in the other states, and we were pretty concerned about the way the advocacy was going in the other states. We could see really adversarial media environment, particularly in New South Wales, where the advocacy seemed to be causing polarisation. It seemed to be activating opposition voices to come out of the woodwork and rally against drug checking. And we were really concerned about that. And we thought, actually, we know Queensland, we know the government and politics and our community here, and we know how to message this in a way that will be effective. A certain Jeff Buckley, in a private capacity, established pill testing for Queensland Alliance. This was at the beginning of 2019. That was then taken over by QNADA. Beck Lang and her team then took carriage of PT for Q over the next few years. This PT for Q was modelled off the successful Human Rights Act for Queensland campaign. You can see the names are very similar. We were strongly inspired by the Human Rights campaign and actually got some really useful advice around how that Human Rights campaign had rolled out in Queensland. It was very inspirational for us in how we should approach it here too. PT4Q was a big alliance of services, unis and families. We had people from the entertainment industry, family members directly impacted by festival-related drug deaths, as well as, a whole bunch of service providers. The focus of that was on local sort of coalition coming together, putting forward to government what we wanted to do. There was also, at that point, we made a decision not to do any media because we knew that media, while it can be successful in some ways, an active media campaign also activates opposition voices. Media by nature seeks out opposition voices to get balanced perspective. If you don't have an organised opposition, don't go and make one by inflaming them with direct media engagement. So we made a decision not to do that. Internally in the loop, what we wanted to do was everything we could under the current system. So we did lots of research. We've got a whole bunch of researchers on our team who did research projects at music festivals, interviewing festival goers about what they want out of drug checking services. We did demonstrations of our equipment at festivals. We would take the FTIR instrument off to music festivals and engage with festival goers. So from 2019 onwards, we started doing that. We were also doing private demonstrations of the equipment for police and policymakers, and these were private, these were not sort of publicly advertised, but we were doing that in order to build understanding of drug checking amongst the decision makers. And as I said, we made a decision to avoid media and public advocacy, just knowing that it can inflame opposition voices, and that actually in Queensland we didn't have an active opposition. We knew that our health minister, going right back to I think when Cameron Dick was health minister in probably 2017, was on the record as saying that words to the effect of that Queensland is considering the evidence around drug checking. We were one of the only states where our health minister had not come out and said, never, ever, I'm not doing that. And we were really careful to preserve that very delicate little balance that we had there, which we managed to do. In 2022, we held our first workshop with Quinn and Quiver. So Quinn is Queensland Injectors Health Network, and Quiver is Queensland Injectors Voice for Action and Advocacy, our drug user organisation. Quinn and Quiver are two really key organisations. I mean, personally, I love them. I started my social work career at Quiver more than 20 years ago, working in what was at the time RaveSafe, and then merged into the Hard Up Hep C Recreational Drug User Project. I also spent time on the board of Quinn as well. So working with Quinn and Quiver is a little bit like coming home, which has been lovely. And one of the really nice things that we've got in Queensland is, as a fairly small sector, we all know each other. We've all worked together for a really long time. So we got together in 2022 with staff and volunteers at Quinn and Quiver to have a workshop around what would drug checking look like delivered in these settings, and what would it take, and what did everyone think about that? And that's when we really started to develop this plan for what we've now rolled out recently. We also knew that we could apply for a license to handle drugs. The two essential parts of delivering drug checking is a license to handle the drugs for the service that does the analysis, and the second part is protection from prosecution for the clients. They're the two essential elements. We knew that we could apply for a general approval under the New Medicines and Poisons Regulation in Queensland to let us handle drugs, and we didn't see anything in the legislation that appeared to stop us from doing that. We are just an analytical lab like a university. university or like anyone else. And so we applied for a general approval in 2022 for one festival and then for all of the Quinn locations in Queensland. We were successful at getting that approval back in 2022. We also knew that in Queensland, needle and syringe programs are already governed by an operational policy for police, which says kind of words to the effect of police are not to conduct unnecessary person checks in the vicinity of needle and syringe programs and opioid treatment clinics. We had a belief that we put forward to police and others that that same guideline would apply to drug checking services. And actually, there's nothing really different about a drug checking service compared to a needle and syringe program, really. They're all harm reduction services, and we need police to not interfere in clients accessing those health services. So in October 2022, after we had our license, we tested some drugs, which has not always been, well publicised. As I say, we didn't do this in the media, but we did test some drugs using our license and testing out the operational guideline. And that was the first drug checking that ever happened in Queensland, October 2022. And I think it was our third sample. We detected something not as expected. So the system worked from day one. Moving forward, in February 2023, the Health Minister at the time, Yvette D'Arth, announced a policy of drug checking in Queensland. What was interesting about the announcement from the Health Minister at the time was that this is not announced as a trial. This was announced as a permanent policy position for Queensland, which is really interesting approach and different to what the ACT has had, which has been sort of framed as a trial. So by the government described it as a permanent policy position, that sort of means that there is an external evaluation which is trying to look not at whether or not drug checking is effective, but does it work in these settings where we're deploying it, which is an interesting kind of angle. The tender was released in late 2023, looking for service providers to come forward with options, and a partnership between Quinn, Quiver and the Loop Australia were successful at getting the contract to deliver fixed site and festivals. Pill Testing Australia also got a small contract to deliver between 1 and 4 festivals in Queensland, and they did a Rabbit Seat Lettuce Festival back at the end of March. So I've already mentioned who Quinn, Quiver and the Loop are, but these are the 3 organisations that came together to deliver the fixed site and festivals. And we had to come up with a name for it, which was a lot of fun. And so we came up with the name of Checkpoint. Q for Queensland and Quinn and Quiver. Thanks to MJ Stowe, who was the brains behind the name. Absolutely ingenious. Thank you, MJ. So Checkpoint is the name of the service. And now I'm going to walk you through about how it works and what's happening. It opened on the 19th of April. It's really easy to work when someone's looking over your shoulder like that in a particular moment. But we opened on the 19th of April at Quinn at Bowen Hills, which is at number 1 Hamilton Place. It's that little blue pin in the middle of the screen there. So there is parking on site. It can be a bit tricky, but there is a car park. We're also about 10-minute walk to the Royal Brisbane Hospital bus station, or another 10 minutes to Bowen Hills train station for people using public transport. At the moment, Quinn at Bowen Hills Checkpoint service is open 12:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. every Friday. It's a completely confidential service. We don't collect any identifying information, and actually people can access the service by giving us no information at all. People can prefer not to say any question that they want, and they can have their drugs checked. So it's low threshold in that there's no appointments, just walk in, there's no ID, there's no names, anything like that. And so far the feedback on that's really positive. Clients really like the opportunity to choose what info they do and don't want to provide to us. A lot of the people we're seeing have not accessed these types of services before, so are quite nervous about private information. Something we did pick up in some of the focus groups which Quiver ran in the lead up to this. Quiver has run a co-design process from the beginning, which is ongoing, which has involved focus groups with clients, either existing clients of Quinn or new potential clients of a drug checking service. And what we've picked up so much useful information out of that. One thing we picked up is existing clients are quite comfortable sharing information because they've been accessing needle and syringe programs for a long time. They're used to participating in research like the IDRS or EDRS. They also have trust in the service. So they're like, yeah, sure, guys, we'll tell you anything. The people who are not connected to the service system, very different. They're really concerned about their private information being seen coming or going. They want to know what research are you going to use this information for exactly. And so there's definitely a different group that we've sort of seen and understood that their needs are a bit different as well. A checkpoint is available for anyone who intends to use drugs. We don't check drugs if a parent finds a bag of suspicious white powder in the bottom of their child's bedside drawer, unfortunately, but we will check drugs for people who intend to use those drugs. So if you're a worker, don't bring your client's drugs in, bring your client instead in with their drugs and we will check them. We will see anyone of any age, including young people aged under 18, providing they can consent, which is no different to any other health service that operates using Gillick competence style mature minor approach for young people, providing informed consent. When people come in, when they first rock up to Quinn at Bowen Hills, we're based in the medical service of Quinn. So it's a standard looking doctor's surgery with a reception area. They're greeted by a Quiver peer worker who says hello to the client and takes them through to our own private waiting room. It has a bit of a chat with them and makes them comfortable and explains the service to them, make sure that whatever they've got for us is something we can actually check. We also ask them some demographic information just on a paper-based form, which is what the co-design that Quiver found was clients felt that they're used to walking into a doctor's surgery, completing a piece of paper. And so they felt that was like a suitable way to do that. We also keep track of all of our times as well, so we can track our wait times. When the person is called, when it's their time, we bring the client upstairs into the lab. We are up a set of stairs at Quiver, at Quinn. So we have got a process for people with limited mobility in order to get them into one of the ground floor counselling rooms that's a bit more accessible. When they go upstairs, we're using one of the other doctors' clinical rooms upstairs in Quinn. So it's a pretty standard looking clinical treatment room with the vinyl flooring. On the left-hand side, you can see the very basic lab setup using FTIR, a few other little bits of equipment. So it's a pretty compact setup. That's just a standard corner desk you'd see in any office. And at the other end of the room, that's a reagent station there where the sink is available for the reagent testing. So it's a pretty compact little setup that we've got. The clients are in with the chemist and a health worker, so the clients get to watch all the analysis happening. There's a few questions we note at the drop-off when the client's handing the sample over. We want to know what they were told the sample was, like what did you purchase it as, what do you expect it might be? Have you already tried it? And if yes, have you had any unusual experience, or is it what you were expecting? And also, why did you bring it for testing? Are you suspicious that it might be something that it's not? And these questions are all just designed to help our chemists know kind of what we're looking for. If a client reported an unusual experience, but our equipment found that it should be as expected, we'd still send that for secondary analysis, because if the client says something weird happened, then we listen to that and we'll try and find out what that might be. The chemist asks the client to provide some of the sample. We only need about 1/10 of a point, about 10 milligrams of a powder crystal pill. We can also test liquid like GHB or liquid LSD, and also blotter as well. We can't test plants or fungi or confectionery like gummies or cookies, use drug equipment, or steroids with an asterisk. For steroids at the moment, steroids are quite difficult to test on a whole bunch of the analytical equipment. We know we've got a huge interest from the steroid community in accessing our service. So we're running a research project in partnership with Griffith University for our first few months, where we're taking steroid samples off people when they come in, but we just can't guarantee an individual result. We're sending all the steroids off to Griffith, who are doing a chemistry research project to look at what are the right methods to test steroids, how quickly can we get these results back to people. We'll be putting out aggregated results from this soon of like what are we generally finding, but the goal is that within a few months, once we've got the method down pat, we'll be able to tell the clients we'll get you a result in the next 2 weeks, and we'll most likely put those results online and clients can just jump on the website and look up their sample and get their result. But we've just got to work out how quickly can we do that, because some of those steroids are a little bit tricky for us to test. So this is what 10 milligrams looks like, just there above the number 6. That is a tenth of 1 point. That larger pile of powder there, that's a point. So we put that image there so people can see what a point is, because most people know points. And then they can see what we're after, which is just a tenth of a point. We are asking clients to just ideally only bring in a tenth of a point, because it does mean you're not in possession of too much drugs. There is no special exemption from prosecution. If a client is pulled up by police on the train with drugs in their pocket and they say, I'm on my way to checkpoint, you're not exempt from prosecution. We do have expanded diversion in Queensland now as of the 3rd of May, which means that people get so-called 3 strikes, a caution followed by 2 referrals to treatment, if they're in possession of less than a gram of pills and powders and 50 grams of cannabis. So we do want people to keep their quantities below that so that they can be eligible for diversion if they do get caught by police on the way in. So it is ideal that they just bring what they want and don't bring their entire stash. We're using FTIR is our primary instrument that we're using. It uses infrared light to bounce through the sample and then checks against a number of different databases looking for similar kinds of spectrums. So this is just an example of an FTIR spectrum. On the top is the sample we've tested, and underneath it is the example from the library. So you can see a really close match there for sugar. It's really useful having the chemists and the clients in the room being able to see this, because a lot of the samples don't come out as clear as that, but the clients can really get an understanding of what the FTIR can detect, but also what it can't, because they can see some of the spectrums right there. We can do a subtraction of that spectrum, so we could delete that sugar spectrum and look for a second spectrum underneath that. And we do that with most samples. So things like cocaine that's been cut with creatine, we'll often get cocaine as the primary hit. And then once we delete that spectrum and look for another spectrum, you'll see something like creatine or some of the cutting agents. There's pros and cons of all this equipment. I mean, the pro is it's really quick, it's super portable, it's pretty cheap, it's fairly reliable as well. The downside of the FTIR, though, is it's only testing a little part of the sample. The samples are not uniform across the baggie. Traces are under 5%. It can't always detect, and that's a bummer, because there's things like nitazines that it may not be able to detect if they're in trace amounts, but also things like benzos, and we are seeing lots of counterfeit Xanax coming in at the moment. And if a Xanax tablet, which may have 1 or 2 milligrams of alprazolam in it, would be less than 5%, and so then we won't be able to detect those on FTIR. FTIR can't do purity. I can't tell someone it's 80% pure based on FTIR. It'll only identify what's in the database, although the databases are very big, and if it's not in there, you probably don't want to take it anyway. We also use reagents as well, which people would be familiar with, halometric reagent testing. This is to look for other types of traces of other drugs that might be in there, and sometimes just to kind of confirm what we might suspect. There's a few of the colours there. We're also using fentanyl test strips for different reasons. If clients are concerned about fentanyl, we'll use it. People who are injecting the drugs that they're providing, we might use it. Or if there's any other concerns, we use fentanyl test strips. We're looking at nitazine test strips at the moment, which have recently been released. We're just not quite sure yet on whether they're sensitive enough or what the cross-reactivity might be. We also use support labs, so we're working with Quace at UQ and Griffith University as well to do secondary analysis. So they're looking for drugs that we can't detect on FTIR. So priority samples for them are things that we can't test, but we're sending everything to them at the moment just so we can start to confirm, are we missing anything on the rest of our equipment? And what else could we be detecting? The goal is down the track that these will be getting purity. We will be getting purity results from the secondary analysis eventually, and we'll be posting those on our website. So the goal is within a couple of months, actually maybe even sooner than that, you could come and get your drugs checked by FTIR with us on a Friday, and we'll tell you what we think it is from the FTIR result. And within about 2 weeks, you can jump on our website and you'll see all of the sample results that we've got, and you can tell which one is yours based on the sample ID number. And so people can come back and get their purities online in a couple of weeks. We have a little health conversation with people when we give them their results. Again, it's all voluntary. We just check how frequently have they used this substance before, just so we get a sense of how experienced are they, how much harm reduction information do they actually need, do they mix drugs, what's their route of administration, have they got any other physical or mental health problems, are they using any other types of medications as well where there might be any medication interactions, and then provide some harm reduction advice in that context. And yeah, we do also ask some questions of people around where they obtained the sample from. We don't ask for their dealer's phone number, but we do ask them if they purchased it, whereabouts did they buy it? Was it bought in Queensland or did they come up from Melbourne? If we were to have to put an alert out, we sort of want to know this information to know, do we do an alert? And if so, where? And how do we target that to the right people? And then we just wrap up by looking at what the next steps might be for the client. So often we'll document our harm reduction advice. Often people will tell us that, okay, they're going to use less now, or they'll let their friends know. And we also check with everyone whether they want a referral or to talk about any other substance problem, nothing to do with what they've dropped off, just any other issue. And of course, we're getting lots of vaping is the thing people want to talk about, which is no surprise. So next, hot off the press, is some of our data that we've got from our first month's operation of Checkpoint in Brisbane. So here we go with our individual presentations. We had, for the first month from 19th of April to 17th of May, we had 32 individual presentations. You can see we had a busy week on the 3rd of May there, followed by a quiet week on the 17th of May. So the numbers go up and down. We haven't done any media really yet at all. We've been waiting for permission to release our data, which we just got yesterday. So this is why you're seeing it for the first time. So we're anticipating our numbers are going to increase once we start getting out there. It's been nice being not too busy to start with, just so we can get our processes down pat and get our team all trained up and ready to go. But yeah, we've had 52 samples presented and from 32 different people. I will say this isn't counting the steroids either. The steroids we're tracking in a different system. So I think from memory, we've had about 35 steroid samples presented for the research project from, I think 5 or 6 people have brought those in. So as I mentioned before, we're tracking our times. We're really concerned about people having to wait a bit too long. So at the moment, average wait time is 19 minutes, but you can see some days people have had to wait up to 45 minutes. And we know from our focus groups that people get concerned at anything close to an hour is too long. And so we're trying to minimize that as much as we can. The average time with a client is 28 minutes. And it ranges from 10 minutes up to 54 minutes in some of the more complex presentations that we've had. Here's the demographics. So you can see our average age 34.7, the range from 20 to 40. A pretty strong male bias there. I don't really know why that is. And we have not had very high numbers of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people coming to the service as yet. We've got about 52% of people tell us that they've not had a previous conversation with a health professional about alcohol and other drugs. This is a lower proportion than we've seen in other drug checking services or at festivals. Majority of people say that they've had a conversation with their GP, which is pretty nice to know that people are actually talking to their GP about alcohol and drugs. But we've also picked up a decent proportion of people who've had some AOD counselling or treatment in the background, followed by people who've been to drug checking services or NSPs. So what have they been coming in with? MDMA has been the most commonly presented drug. We've had 12 MDMA presentations in that first month, and 11 of them turned out to be MDMA. How's that? And actually only MDMA. Of the one sample that we got that was not just MDMA, was MDMA plus 4-CMC plus methylsulfone, which is just MSM as a cutting agent. So that was our one unusual MDMA presentation. That client, I believe, suspected something was weird about that one, so I think they'd already worked that out. After that, our next most common has been alprazolam and LSD, but I wanted to talk about alprazolam or Xanax. We're getting heaps of them, actually, and even underneath that, you'll see we've got 2 people presented with bromozolam powder. We've also had counterfeit Valium as well. So we're seeing if you grouped all the benzos together, benzos are our second most common, family of substances that are being presented. We can't detect alprazolam at the rates it might be in some of these tablets. Having said that, we have actually got some sort of low confidence hits of some novel benzos from these tablets anyway, but we're not quite confident enough to give that result to the client. Some of them we suspect have got other benzos in there as well. So those are all off getting secondary analysis at the moment to try and understand what else might be in them. Having said that, even with these presentations coming in, if we can't give the client a result, we're still doing very thorough interventions with those clients. And amongst this group, we have detected a bunch of people, relatively young sort of client group, including people who are definitely showing some of the signs of benzodependence. Also, what we've noticed in people presenting some of the counterfeits annex is they're often people are self-medicating underlying mental health concerns. They're not so much your recreational drug using cohort. It's much more people are self-medicating mental health concerns, and then in the context potentially ending up with some bigger problems down the track around benzodependence. We've had quite a few LSD presentations. We're just using Ehrlich reagent on those, which will give us an indication if it's an LSD or similar. And so far, they all look like they have been. The cocaine has been remarkably cocaine. We've only had one non-cocaine presentation, which was dimethylpentylone mixed with a benzocaine or similar, one of the cane analogues mixed together. Again, that was in someone who had suspected that. The 2CB, we've had 3 2CB samples have been presented, and only one of them have been 2CB. One of them turned out to be MDMA. Again, that was in someone who thought it might have been MDMA. But the second presentation that we got actually turned out to be a mixture of ketamine, predominantly ketamine mixed with MDMA in a very distinctive pink color, which we believe to be 2C. 2C, so a bit of a confusion there from the 2CB and the 2C TUSI. 2C TUSI is a combination of ketamine and MDMA that's come out of Colombia. That's often in a very distinctive bright pink color. It's been sort of popular, weirdly popular in Europe in summer last year. It sort of became a thing. CanTest in Canberra have detected some as well. So it's in the Australian market. I mean, there's no major concerns about the health risks in that it is ketamine and a little bit of MDMA. But for people who are expecting 2CB, it's a little bit unusual. We've had 2 methamphetamine samples. One of them contained magnesium sulfate, also known as Epsom salts. Bromazolam powder, the novel benzo, which was very much bromazolam. Modafinil, which was modafinil, and 3-MMC, which was turned out to be dimethylpentylone. There are a few other samples I haven't included in this. We'll put the full data report out next week on Checkpoint Brisbane. Underneath these numbers, we've got a number of single presentations of some novel tryptamines, some other novel phenethylamines, a few other rare little Pokemons, but nothing incredibly dangerous so far in that where we've detected things not as expected, the clients have often been suspicious of that, but there's not been any reason for us to do any urgent alerts at this stage based on the information that people have been giving us. So here's a couple of pictures. This is the 2C, the ketamine MDMA combo. You can see it's very bright pink. As soon as we saw it, we were both a little suspicious that that might be 2C from Colombia, and it turned out that it was. Here's another image. This is Epsom salts, sadly sold as methamphetamine. So some of the outcomes, this is in terms of like, what are the clients going to do after having a chat with our service? And this doesn't all add up to 31. People can select multiple outcomes. You can see the majority of people are going to take the same amount as usual, which is not unexpected because most of the results we're getting are what people expected they were getting. So most people are like, that's good to know. A lot of people will alert their friends and acquaintances and others about the result. We are getting quite a few people saying they're going to take more care mixing substances. Mixing drugs is a really common discussion point for us, or taking over a longer period of time as well, particularly the MDMA samples. Well, we can't tell purity. We are saying to people, you should probably assume it is quite pure. So you should probably try and space that out or take a lower dose than you would normally take. And people are quite open to doing that. We've had a few discards as well. So because we're telling people don't bring your whole stash in, quite a few people are like, I've got more at home and I'll take it at home and I'll chuck it in the bin. We have had a few people ask us to dispose of substances as well. And what's been really good about that is it's all the substances that we would actually want people to dispose. They are disposing, which are those missold cathinones, etc. Well, you'll also see that nobody told us they would take more drugs after coming to the service. So that's the first bit of checkpoint data. As I say, we'll have more comprehensive data than that coming out next week when we release that fully. But next up, I just wanted to go through our festival data as well. So we did drug checking at Earth Frequency Festival, which was held at Willowbank in the first weekend of May. There's a bit of an image of the service. They're all staff standing there. They're not clients in that photo if you're concerned. But that's our little drug checking tent out the back of the harm reduction service. So we were discreetly tucked away so that people would initially come to, there's Conscious Nest, which is a psychedelic care space, and there's Quiver High Ground information stall. And those were kind of at the front. So they would sort of chat to people and then point them down the back to where the drug checking was, just to give people a bit of privacy and a bit of discretion and coming out the back to the service. When you walk in the service, here's a couple of our dedicated staff on their tablets getting ready to start saving lives. The table there has just got a whole bunch of the demographic forms. So as clients come in to drop off, we just ask them to fill out some demographic information for us. And once they've done that, we call them over to a little table on the left-hand side with our chemists. Our chemists instruct the person in providing us some of the sample just at the table there. So they'll take either a scraping or spoon out some powder. We take a photo of the sample at that point as well and drop it into a little lockbox. We give the client a raffle ticket with the sample number on it, and they come back. And, you know, I think on the first day we were saying 2 hours, but by the next day we were down to about 30 minutes that we could get results back. What we found though was that people want to come back in about an hour and a half because they're at a festival. So they drop off, they go off and have fun, and then they come back. On the right-hand side, you can see our chemists slaving away in the lab there in our little demountable building. We had 2 FTIRs operating in there as well as reagents on site. We also were doing some research at the festival as well. So we had researchers wandering around interviewing festival patrons who may not come into the drug checking service about their drug use, what they think about drug checking as well. So we can have a look at who uses the service and also who doesn't and start to understand why. But we also did wastewater analysis as well. This is Nicole, one of our very dedicated chemists, taking an actual sample from a poo truck, which is very, very dedicated, and it is just as disgusting as you might think. I think it was meant to get scooped out of the truck, but the guy said, no, just turn the tap, and then it went everywhere. So we've got 2 samples from the poo truck from Portaloos across 2 different days of the festival as well. So we'll be interested to see what comes back from the wastewater. In terms of our presentations at Earth Frequency Festival, we had 152 individuals, dropped off 230 samples over the 3 days that we were operating. So we were open 12 to 6 on the first day, then 10 a.m. to 6 on Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 on Sunday. We got, large numbers of samples dropped off. I think in our first 3 hours of opening on the first day, we had nearly 50 samples dropped off in about 3 hours, which was a little bit chaotic, but we got them all in. And the first day, we were averaging, people would come back in about 2.5 hours for their results. What people were doing would be they'd come and drop off between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. was like major drop off time. And then from 4 to 6 p.m. was pick up the results time, which kind of makes sense in the context of a festival because you're getting ready for your big night out. So we were able to predict this though, because we could see quite nervously on the first day that we've had like 50 people have dropped off and only 20 people have come back for their results. So we're going to get slammed. And so we did. We were able to have 5 different results consultations going at once in the afternoons to get the numbers through. So our goal was to not have people waiting at our service for too long. Because if you're sitting here in a queue, then you're actually not having fun at your festival. So we'd rather you just drop off, go away, and then come back, and we'll hopefully see you straight away. So wait times did drop off a little bit. By the 3rd day, our wait time, we could get results out in 30 minutes. But people didn't want that. They were happy to wander off and come back when they were comfortable. So we had a pretty diverse range of ages at the festival, from age 17 up to age 63. Again, a male bias in the gender breakdown, a little bit more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, although still, I think, underrepresented. A larger proportion of people haven't had conversations with health professionals in this sort of festival setting. So about 61% said that they had not. Amongst those who had, though, GP was again the most common, followed by counselling or treatment again. There were people who'd used drug checking services before, which included our own service. So over the days, we had people coming back multiple times. Also, a decent number of people had been to needle and syringe programs in the past as well. So there were 230 samples that we tested, which was a lot, averaging 1.5 samples per person. So we didn't have any limits on how many samples people could get tested. 6 was the most that anyone presented. If people wanted to present lots of samples, we would accept that and just say you might have to wait a bit longer for it to get through the system. But yeah, and MDMA was the most common by a big margin, so 106 MDMA presentations, followed by ketamine. After that, then numbers drop right off for all of the other drugs. But you can see, yeah, cocaine, LSD, and then what people believe to be mescaline, and then a big list of other less common sorts of substances there as well. We did have a few people who'd had rare tryptamine in their bottom drawer for many years, and they were wanting to come out and get it tested, which was fascinating to see. So what was in it all? Well, actually, everything was pretty much what people expected. Of 106 MDMA presentations, 103 seemed to contain MDMA only, which was a pretty surprisingly congruent result. Of the ones that didn't contain MDMA, we had 2 dimethylpentylone. One of them was lactose, which was also negative on the reagent for MDMA. It looked like a pharmaceutical pill fragment sort of put into a capsule. So it was, we didn't actually know what that was. That client was suspicious on that as well, and I don't think had actually taken it. So of the ketamine results, 65 ketamine presentations and 60 of them detected just ketamine. We got 2 ketamine analogs sold as ketamine, which is a lot lower than we were expecting. We thought we'd see quite a lot of that, but we really didn't. There was a methylsulfone cutting agent with a low confidence match for ketamine, so it's probably very cut ketamine. There was a benzyl cyclohexamine plus a low confidence teletamine, and benzyl cyclohexamine is a cutting agent. Teletamine is a pretty toxic kind of dissociative, although there was only low confidence on that one. The client had reported a very strong effect, though, from whatever that sample was. So that's obviously a fairly concerning result, that one, because it's definitely not what you're expecting, but you're getting some quite strong psychoactive effect. We also got one ketamine result, which came back as methamphetamine. And again, the client was aware of that. The client had used some, and I think that was a bit of a mix-up on the baggies. Of the cocaine, it was also pretty much all cocaine. Again, a bit surprising. 12 expected out of 14 presented. One of the not cocaines was a novel mescaline analog, which I'll talk about in a sec. This was not sold as ketamine. I think this was, I was kind of there when this one happened. This, I believe, was a client mixing up baggies. The client had quite a few samples to drop off, and I believe that this one was just a bit of a mix-up. I don't think this was cocaine being sold as cocaine that turned out to be mescaline analog. We did get a creatine lidocaine as well. The LSD, we're using reagent, all looked pretty much like LSD. The most incongruent result were what people were presenting as mescaline. So there were 5 people who presented what they thought was mescaline. 2 of those turned out to be LSD. The other 3 were a little bit inconclusive on our FTIR at the time, but we have just got GCMS back yesterday and identified a new novel mescaline analog called diformal mescaline. Diformal mescaline has only ever been identified once in the world before, which is in Brisbane a couple of years ago. And there's a paper published by a bunch of chemists from Queensland Forensic Scientific Services who got a single presentation of diformal mescaline, which they went about analysing and identifying in 2023. So interesting that we've then picked it up as well. So I'll talk a little bit more about that one in a sec. We got a couple of amphetamine samples, one of which turned out to be methamphetamine, a 2CB, which was actually probably MDMA, Those were the main sort of unusual kinds of results. Here's an image of the diformal mescaline, though. This is that new novel mescaline analog. We don't know a huge amount about it. I mean, it's a very new compound. The paper from Queensland Forensic Scientific Services indicates that it might be a mescaline prodrug, in that it may be a substance that converts to mescaline in an acidic environment, like your stomach. Now, we don't know that for sure, and so we're not sort of publicising that really to the community yet, because we don't quite know, is that really the case, or are there other products that might be produced from that metabolism that could be harmful? So on the surface, it looks like a mescaline prodrug, but there could be more to it, and we need a bit more information before we sort of go out on that. People could interpret that as, oh, that's great, it's just like mescaline, but the metabolism could produce some other drugs too, and then what else is going on when that's happening, we don't really know. So we were advising, we couldn't get this wasn't in our library when we were testing this at the festival, but didn't really matter, because I know I did all of these interventions for this one, and the one young person in particular was very happy to chuck it out, because I was like, if it's not in our library, then I don't know whether you want to take it. And it's the last night of the festival, like, you're not going to know what dose to take, or like, do you really want to waste your last night of the festival on a weird new drug? And her answer was no. So she chucked that one out. So we're doing a little bit more work now to understand what else might be going in there. But yeah, very fascinating that the previous encounters of that compound were only from Brisbane. This is a pressed tablet. This is one of the pressed tablets that was sold as MDMA that actually contained dimethylpentylone. So yeah, it looks like a Google pressed tablet. This was another dimethylpentylone sold as MDMA, a kind of bright orangey looking powder, possibly a crushed up tablet is what we were sort of wondering, just looking at the color of that. And it might actually be that this is a tablet previously identified as dimethylpentylone, so someone's crushed it into a powder, because then it doesn't look as identifiable. We did get, this is just also an image too of the 2-fluoro-dischloroethyl norketamine, sold as ketamine, big chunky crystal there. That was one of the 2 samples that we got that was sold as ketamine. But other than that, all of the ketamine turned out to be actually ketamine, which was a bit surprising. So this is what actions will you take after coming into the service. Again, 2/3 of people said they'll take the same amount as usual, because of course the drugs were what people were expecting. After that, we got very high numbers of people informing their friends and acquaintances, and nearly 30% saying they'd take care mixing drugs. And we got 1/4 of people saying they'll take less than usual. While we can't give purity, well, most of these results were MDMA. We were saying to people, I can't tell you how pure it is, but you've got to pretend like it's really pure when you're dosing that out, because you don't know any better. So it was fairly easy to get people to agree to take a little bit less than they were intending to take, and just be a bit more cautious about that. Also seeking assistance if needed. So a lot of the interventions would be pointing out where the medical service is and where the conscious nest is if people do need to get help, or people spacing out their drugs, getting more information about their drugs, informing their supplier. Some people were giving it away, which they were already intending to do. These were people who were sharing drugs with their friends, had purchased it with friends and inner groups. And we got a small number of discards as well. So we had 5 people say that they were going to discard it themselves back at their campsite. And we had a few people come and dispose with us as well. And again, when we look at those disposals, they're the ones we wanted to dispose. So those were people, so mescaline analog was one, there's dimethylpentylone was some of the other ones. We also got a sample of 1,4-butanediol sold as GHB, which someone came and disposed of with the loop as well. And no people reporting that they would be taking larger doses. So that's our first big chunk of data that you heard it first. Now, what can you do to support us and make this happen even more? We would really love it if particularly local services in Southeast Queensland promoted Checkpoint to your clients. There is a poster on Quinn's website, and there's a URL there and a little QR code. There's a poster and a whole bunch of promotional material which you can download off Quinn's website and print those out and put them up in your NSP or in your waiting room to start promoting it to clients. You could print it out for yourself and hand it to clients. There's also brochures that explain how drug checking works. Very comprehensive FAQ. There's all the information that workers need to promote the service to their clients. So jump online and help us out by promoting us to your clients. We're also quite happy for workers to bring clients in, particularly youth AUD workers. If you've got a young person under 18 that's a bit nervous about coming in, bring them in, come in together. That's totally cool. If you want, give us a call in advance to check on how busy we are. Or if you want to call us for a chat, just give us a ring at Quinn and we can let you know what the wait times might be if you're in a bit of a hurry. But we're really supportive of workers, supporting their clients to come in who are a bit nervous. Follow us on all the various Instagram channels. This is where alerts and information will be going out. We are also recruiting at the moment. So I have to give a little bit of a plug. We are recruiting health and harm reduction workers on the Gold Coast. So anybody who is on the Gold Coast who has a qualification in a health-related discipline, jump on the Loop's website or drop me an email at cam@theloop.org.au because we are recruiting. We're looking to launch our Gold Coast service in the first week of July. There hasn't been wide promotion of that yet. On the Gold Coast, there's still got a bit of work to do, but we're recruiting down there. We're also recruiting chemists as well. So if you know any casual chemists or casual health workers that would like one shift a week on the Gold Coast doing drug checking, drop us a line. That's all I had to present. So are there questions? Jeff?
Thank you very much, Cameron. Yes. There are a couple of questions online. This one you kind of mentioned earlier on about, or if you could explain the rationale a little bit further as to why only testing for people who is intended to be used by that person and not by somebody else, the rationale for that.
Yeah, we need people's consent, basically. We need consent. And drugs are people's property. And so people have a right to consent to have their property tested or not. There could be scenarios where someone's like, well, my friend's too nervous to come in here, so I've sent them in with my friend instead. And I mean, we'll be happy to chat with people about those types of scenarios. The main concern we've got is people bringing in someone else's drugs for drug checking that turns out to not have a harm reduction purpose. And so we're a harm reduction service, and that's the goal of what we're doing. And so that's why we would want the person whose drugs they are ideally to bring them in. Yeah.
Thank you. And just to clarify, I think I could answer this one, but there's no actual restrictions on police kind of being around the outside. It's more of an understanding or an MOU with police. Is that correct?
It's an operational guideline for Queensland Police Service. So yeah, the operational guideline is the same guideline that's been in place around needle and syringe programs. It has been updated to specifically mention drug checking services. The line is, it's something like the officer in charge of the region is responsible for making sure that all officers on duty are aware of the location and opening hours of harm reduction services like NSPs and drug checking, and that they're not to conduct unnecessary person checks in the vicinity of those services. So there's no sort of guaranteed you're free from getting prosecuted kind of thing, but QPS are not to interfere in people accessing. And QPS have been really supportive for a very long time, actually. The previous police commissioner was very supportive of drug checking, and our current police commissioner is very supportive of drug checking as well. So we know that we've got the support of police, and actually we've always had the support of police in Queensland. It was one of the really key elements for us making drug checking happen here, was to have the support of QPS.
Thank you. Have any kind of service users expressed an intention to spread knowledge of the testing facilities they used in terms of promoting Checkpoint or the...
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah. Already. I mean, yeah, we've already got people coming in because their friend came in last week. And so, yeah, people are, word of mouth is super effective. And yeah, people see the results, and drugs are social things. So people talk about it to their friends. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you anticipate you'll be able to detect a wider range of novel benzos in the future?
Yes, we do. And we're looking at some new equipment for the Gold Coast. The equipment is constantly evolving, and we are trialling some new equipment on the Gold Coast when we open. We're not making any promises yet because chemistry is a complex thing as to what we can and can't detect in the future, but we're constantly revising the method and trying to improve it. Seeing the numbers of counterfeit benzo, well, suspected counterfeit benzos coming in, it's definitely a focus for us. That counterfeit benzo client group are a different client group to everyone else as well. As I mentioned before, they're definitely not a recreational cohort. We're seeing some really serious substance use disorders in that group and some, really complex mental health as well. So our whole approach to that benzo client group is we're working on it. And there's a chemistry element of that, and then there's a health element of that too. And it's getting those two parts right. What is interesting though is that even when we can't get someone a super accurate result on site, we've been able to do some pretty good interventions with them, and that we've been able to have some very detailed conversations and assessments of their issues and referral options and that kind of thing. So the drug checking's benefit is in the health intervention. Even in the absence of a clear test result, we're still able to have good conversations with them anyway.
Thank you for that response. Also, can you just comment a little bit more on the research on the outcomes and effectiveness of your service, that component of the model?
On the evaluation?
External evaluation, actually.
Okay. So the external evaluation is being run by the Institute of Social Science Research at UQ, which is being led by Caroline Salom. So there's a whole bunch of elements to it. I'm honestly not across the whole thing because it's an external evaluation. So we're not sort of involved in designing the model kind of thing. They are looking at follow-up surveys of clients after they've accessed the service to see like what actual behaviour change happens against the stated behaviour change that we're recording. We're also really keen for them to look at the resourcing component. Something we've discovered very, very quickly, which we knew this would happen, is that we're way under-resourced. Like the amount of labour that's involved in delivering the service, we're probably at least half the labour resource that we're paid for. So while some people have got wages, we're still running at least half the team voluntary in the actual service delivery as well. So one element of the evaluation is looking at that, is the resourcing appropriate as well.
No more questions, Your Honour. There were a few comments around looking for volunteer opportunities, which Ben has sent links to already to your website. So thank you to those people who have expressed an interest. Please join me in thanking Cameron for that fabulous overview of the history of drug checking in Queensland and your service results.